Well, welcome everyone to another edition of Navigating Trump 2.0. This is the show that takes a look at what's happening in Washington, D.C. through the lens of the second Trump administration. Joining me, CBN News chief political analyst David Brody and host of CBN's Quick Start podcast, Dan Andros. And guys, it's unusual that when we talk one week and then we come back and we talk another week that the topics remain the same. I think we are the victims a lot of times of being we're captured in the news of the moment. But you know, here this is a little refreshing. We talked about the government shutdown and the situation in the Middle East last week, and now here we are again, going to expand on these two topics and continue on a continuation of subjects broached in the previous week, building one episode after another. I think this is a novel concept, and so we're gonna give it a whirl here on this edition of Navigating Trump 2.0. We'll start with the government shutdown, day 16 as we record here on Thursday. Republican Senator John Kennedy said on Wednesday that this could go through Thanksgiving. That was an interesting note, I thought, hearing from him. As Republicans are now openly talking about, there doesn't seem to be any sign that this government shutdown is going to end. Not a lot of optimism on the Democrat side either. We all know what's forcing this right now. Democrats want Republicans to negotiate over Obamacare subsidies that are set to expire. Republicans are demanding Democrats vote on the clean continuing resolution that passed the House about 4 weeks ago. So, David, how much has changed since last week? And do you agree with Senator Kennedy that this could go on through November?
Yes, 100%. I think it'll go on way past that. I don't see any end in sight. I don't see any end in sight. I mean, there's got to be obviously an end in sight at some point. But let's get through the No Kings rally this weekend. This is where Chuck Schumer is going to go rah, rah, far left. Please embrace me because I don't want to lose to AOC. That's the name of the rally. That's what they should call it. So, I mean, that's what I'm being very serious, actually. That's exactly what this rally is about. I know a lot of people say it's not about that, but for Schumer, it's about that for sure. He's got to show a brave front. I stood up to Trump. Well, where is standing up to Trump gotten the Democrat Party? It got them Trump 1. It got them Trump 2 after all of the indictments. And it's not looking good for the midterms as well. I mean, this is your strategy to stop Trump. This just in, you haven't. And I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon for the Democrats. Look, the Republicans, there's no daylight in between any Republican factions. And normally there is, but not this time around. Not this time around. And Russ Vought and the OMB director and President Trump have a once in a lifetime opportunity here to kind of reshape the federal government. I know the courts are going to get involved with federal employees, but when it comes to programs getting cut, they do have discretion. A lot more of that towards the end of the week and into next week. So, yeah, I don't see it happening anytime soon at all.
Dan, what do you think? How do you feel about the length of this government shutdown? It's already going to be on track to be the longest ever, for almost for sure. Do you get the sense that this could go through Thanksgiving and longer as well?
It seems like it, but I mean, like we talked about last time, that I thought, okay, optics aren't good here. I kind of thought Democrats, it was a blame game we talked about, and I thought Democrats might be the ones that kind of landed with more of that blame in the eyes of the public opinion. But apparently they do not care about this at all. And so they want to just stick forward and go. So it does seem like it's going to continue on. But I maybe speak for a lot of Americans. I don't. And again, this could be just, sort of the I can't think of the word, but the side of me that isn't the biggest fan of large bureaucracies. I don't know that you're going to get a ton of sympathy in the public when there's like, oh no, these people are all losing their jobs. And on a human level, I don't like to see anyone lose their jobs, but like from a political level, from a 30,000 foot view level, I just don't know that you're going to get a lot of fear and sympathy of people seeing the government get smaller. Like I don't, yes, you want basic things funded like the military and essential operations, and a lot of those will remain funded. So as long as that part of it's taken care of, I don't know that portion and the argument about X amount of jobs being lost is really going to have much of an impact.
Well, and Dan, on the jobs aspect of this, the Trump administration last week sent a notice of intent to lay off 4,100 federal workers during the shutdown that a federal judge in San Francisco declared illegal. And David mentioned that Russell Vought, who heads the Office of Management and Budget, has said there could be as many as 10,000 federal workers laid off during this shutdown. Is the Trump administration overreaching by laying off this many people? Like, is that such a big number that it might even shock the kind of people that you're talking about, like the 10,000 layoffs of federal workers? And, you know, we don't really know what the effect of the layoffs would be, or, you know, we kind of know what departments they're coming from and how it's kind of divvied out, at least with the 4,000. But whether or not this affects services for people in some of the states who are affected, like you would be talking about, maybe they don't have a lot of sympathy, or they just can't relate to, you know, necessarily the federal workers in Washington, D.C., who, again, have I think the federal workforce has, among the general public, been seen as kind of like living high on the hog a little bit. And for those of us who know federal workers, most of the time they're just working regular jobs like everybody else. But, you know, there is a personal side to this, but I'm just talking like from a sheer numbers perspective. And then what it is these people do for people living in some of these states where they might seem disconnected. I wonder if there comes a point where the number's too high.
Well, and I think you nailed it. I think it's if people feel a difference, that's when it will start to have a really negative impact. But I think we've tried the oversized government thing for so long now, and what has it gotten us other than trillions and trillions of dollars in debt? I mean, I feel like people are willing to roll the dice and say, well, let's see what happens if the government has 10,000 less jobs in it. Maybe they could find some things that are quote unquote non-essential that doesn't cause a lot of pain for Americans. And if they don't feel it, I don't think it's going to matter. I mean, we've got trillions of dollars of debt. And, you know, I think it's a hard sell to the American public to say, hey, we need to keep all these jobs going as we just see debt piling up. But I think the kind of the game changer in that argument is if indeed people start saying like, well, wait a minute, I don't know, the FAA, all these things, they're not functioning and it's impacting my day-to-day life, then yes, things that might not play out the way I'm thinking.
Yeah, and David, we've seen that a little bit, especially at the nation's airports. A lot of flight delays this past week, and there is a concern, I think, in Republican circles that things like this could it change the narrative? Whereas, you know, the Republicans, I think, had the winning argument in terms of popular opinion in the polling as far as who's to blame for this shutdown over the first few weeks. But at a certain point, if it affects people being able to board flights, if it affects everyday things, does it then matter? Do people care who's to blame at a certain point?
No, it's a good point. And also, here's another thing to consider. President Trump is considered the guy, right? The art of the deal. All right, so where's the deal here? And I think some people might wonder about that. And once again, not MAGA. They don't want him to cut a deal. But, you know, independents and others will say, OK, if you're such a great deal maker, why don't you cut a deal and get this government back on track? Having said that, I totally agree with Dan. I mean, listen, around the D.C. metro area in the DMV, as we like to say, there's a lot of pain with federal workers being, having their lives and jobs interrupted. But overall, it's not really this big conversation topic, at the dinner tables. I mean, if you think about it, so if we're going to resume and start the government again, what is that code for? That's code for, OK, let's resume the bloated government. So why would we want to resume the bloated government? I mean, I think there's some logic in a lot of logic in what Dan is saying is like, why would we want to go back to that? So I think there is an opportunity for Republicans here to cut some of the bloat and say, OK, we'll do that. And then we'll see what we have going forward.
And David, real quick, before we move on, just as far as this No Kings rally, these No Kings rallies happening this weekend, can you kind of flesh out a little bit more about what to expect, what we're expecting this weekend? I mean, I know they're happening in a lot of different cities, and we've heard Mike Johnson, House Speaker, yesterday calling them anti-America rallies, expecting Antifa-type individuals, pro-Hamas, not pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas folks to be at these different rallies, and obviously Democrats and progressives are pushing back hard on that. What is it? I mean, it's understandable where both sides are lining up on these rallies this weekend. Can you just kind of give us a sense of like what we should expect to see this weekend?
Well, lots of rah-rah far left rhetoric. I mean, this is the far left that's driving the Democrat Party. Look, this is not the blue dog Democrats out there. This is not your moderate Democrats. This is not the Andy Beshears of the world, the governor of Kentucky. I don't think you're going to see him show up at the No Kings rally. He might believe it to a degree, but he's not going to get sucked in. The moderate Dems are not going to get sucked in to this far left rhetoric. And, you know, the literature I've seen has said, keep it clean, keep it peaceful. Yeah, good luck. That's not typically how far left rallies have gone down. So I'm not sure about that. Now, on a personal level, I just want to say I'm going to New York City this weekend, and I'm a little concerned because I got to figure out my travel plans. I'm going to New York, and I mean this in all seriousness. I look to see where the No Kings rallies are, and I'm like, oh, great. It's right exactly where we want to be at this exact time in New York. And I'm like, so I got to figure that out. And of course, ultimately, as you guys know, it really is all about me. As you know. So I don't think I've made any bones about that. I think I've been pretty transparent with that, guys.
No, I think, David, your pro-David Brody stance is well established here.
Thank you. And I'm proud of that, obviously.
Yeah,
man.
For sure. It's part of your platform for a long time. Let's talk about the Middle East a little bit here. And obviously, one of the biggest accomplishments, if not the biggest accomplishment of Trump 2.0, and really of any parts of his two administrations so far, was the release of the final Israeli hostages to Israel, the living hostages. 20 Israeli hostages returned back to Israel earlier in the week. The president was in Israel, of course, to be there for that celebration, and then went to Egypt a few hours later to sign an important deal there with a couple of a few nations in the region that will all be working together to try and continue the peace process into the next phases. And as we talked about a week ago, that's where the difficulty really comes in with these next phases. Even as the week has gone on here, Hamas said that accessing the remaining bodies that need to be returned back to Israel, the hostages who died while in captivity, who were killed while in captivity, will require significant efforts in what they called specialized equipment. Axios reported that Israel believes Hamas is capable of locating and returning all of the hostages, more than a dozen or so bodies, and that they would not advance the ceasefire deals to the next stage until Hamas does so. Now, they had said they were only going to permit half of the aid trucks to enter the Gaza Strip until this took place. But on Wednesday, they did allow all vehicles to enter into the Gaza Strip. So, Dan, we talked last week a little bit about this, and we're talking about the next steps and how this was really going to be the difficult part. Hamas disarming, getting out of control of Gaza, working the Palestinian Authority in, what that's going to look like, and all of those different things. How do you feel about where things stand after we had all of the celebration at the beginning of the week, and now we're a few days past it?
Well, great that aside from the remains that we're waiting for, great that the hostages are free, still celebrating that. But like we talked about last time, you can't trust Hamas as far as you can throw them. These are terrorists. We saw what they did on October 7th, and that kind of gives you a little bit of a window into the apparent souls of these people who gleefully film themselves riding around, slaughtering innocent people and kidnapping them, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can't trust them. I mean, they already sent one of the remains they sent back was not of a hostage, according to Israel. So this is a sort of thing that you could kind of expect that they would do. And then here we go moving forward. They're looking to essentially kind of try to put the two-state solution back on the table again, which I don't think Israel and America will be on board with. We saw Trump with the warning saying, we'll happily, start right back up in Gaza again if you do not hold up your end of the bargain. So while I was cautiously optimistic that maybe a decimated Hamas would think, all right, this is the time to cut our losses here and regroup, and we wouldn't see shenanigans at least for a while, maybe we've upped that a little bit, upped the concern a little bit, saying, okay, we've seen their first steps and they're Hamasing again. And so, a little more caution here, and that's why I think you saw Trump issue that warning. But it's not. I don't think it's gone fully off the rails yet, but there's some warning signs there.
Yeah, that's a dangerous verb, Hamasing. That's scary stuff. Couple of things. You mentioned a warning, Dan. Here's another warning, and this is part of that phase 2, right? Disarming Hamas. President Trump said this week, well, look, if they're not going to disarm, we'll disarm them. Really? Really? Quick question. How are you going to do that? Got any details on that? And of course, the follow-up question was asked, and he didn't have any details, or at least he didn't want to share any details. The point is that kind of feels like, I don't know, U.S. troops, which doesn't feel very MAGA, which doesn't feel very Trump doctrine. So, let's wait and see about that. How's that going to go exactly? And just in terms of disarming Hamas overall, forget the warning that Trump had and all of that. How is that going to work exactly? I mean, this is not like one of those gun programs where you turn in your weapons at the local 7-Eleven. I mean, Hamas is not going to be saying, here you go, where's the basket, and let me get a corn dog with that. So I'm not quite sure how this happens, guys. And as a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure it's not going to happen. And if it is, I'm concerned it's going to be smoke and mirrors. I really do. I think it's going to be some sort of, white paper PDF document of this is how it's going to officially go. And then we'll get a couple of visuals of a couple of Hamas folks in uniform handing over weapons of some sort to Egypt or Jordan or probably Qatar, actually, or Turkey. And then we'll say, I guess it worked. Yeah, okay. I don't believe it as far as I can throw it.
Well, and they're executing people in the streets right now.
Exactly.
I mean, these are the video that are going online. I mean, this is who you're dealing with. They're executing Palestinians who they think collaborated with Israel. Right. And again, it's being filmed and shared online. They're like, hey, look at this. Who wants to come live in Gaza? I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And I guess the logical next question after we talk about Hamas and the likelihood that they would disarm and give up power, whatever power they have left in a now decimated Gaza Strip, and handing things over to the Palestinian Authority is, what does this look like? Even if you can get those things accomplished, are we back to a two-state solution? That is something Netanyahu, I think, over the last year or so, especially since October 7th, has been essentially ruling that out, has he not? I mean, I know there are still many, basically everyone in Europe still is demanding for a two-state solution and an independent Palestine state as any kind of permanent solution to what's happening there. But it feels as though, at least in terms of where Israel is, that moment has passed. But is this, David, kind of resurrecting that idea?
It is. It is. But just to be clear, just kind of theoretically, or at least let's take this in two different stages here. From the Arab nation standpoint, yes, it's more than theoretical. They actually have an idea of how they can accomplish it. I don't have that information, but I'm sure they do. From Netanyahu's standpoint, it's non-negotiable. No, absolutely not. He's not doing that, especially after October 7th. They're going to be rewarded with the Palestinian. I say the Palestinian people. Sorry, but you're linked in with Hamas based on the fact that 65% of you voted for Hamas. So the Palestinian people getting having a two-state solution out of this. That is not happening on Netanyahu's watch. So they either got to change leadership in Israel, or there will be a serious conversation between President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu about, hey, Bibi, this is the way forward. You got to get on board, or else we may be stopping some payments and some other military equipment sending to Israel. I hope it doesn't come to that, but Trump just wants a deal. That's all Trump wants. I don't think he's too concerned about the two-state solution at all in terms of what Israel thinks about it. I mean, he cares about what Israel thinks about it, but I don't think that's his line in the sand. But it's Netanyahu's line in the sand for sure. So, yeah, I think that's exactly where this is going. And did you notice the temperature in the room between Israel and Egypt? Right? And Israel is like a love fest, and Trump was doing stand-up comedy like it was the Catskills. He literally, it was like that. I was ready for like a veal dinner and Henny Youngman to come out there. I kid you not. I mean, my Uncle Bernie, I grew up Jewish. My Uncle Bernie was the MC at Brown's Hotel in the Catskills, and I literally reminded me of like like Trump is playing 2 sets, a 7 p.m. and a 9 p.m. tonight. But anyhow, so you had that. And then in Egypt, what did you have? You had like this serious faces and like kicking, dragging, screaming. We don't like Israel. We really can't stand them, but we're doing this for Trump. And then it looked like a pageant parade. Every single Egyptian leader getting up and like shaking Trump's hand like he's at the prom and they're just his date for the evening. The whole thing was just wild.
It was, and I felt like it looked like the president was in his element, right?
Oh.
He was enjoying every second of that day. So, and universally, he has been praised, and his administration has been praised for the work done up to that point, releasing the final 20 hostages. Those were the hardest 20, because that was the last bit of leverage that Hamas had with regards to what's been the fighting and any negotiations. So it truly was a masterful job by Steve Witkoff and by Jared Kushner and by the Trump administration and by the president and his force of personality, I think, to kind of make it changed the calculus in the negotiations, I think, because I don't think either side really knew for sure where Trump would go with regards to Israel in the Middle East. We've talked about it before. Trump is a sovereigntist. He believes in U.S. sovereignty, and he's less attached to alliances and adversaries. And I think it's part of the wild card nature was maybe what was needed to finish this portion of the war in Gaza. And now we see whether or not he'll be able to use that effectively to kind of move the ball down the field here in phases 2 and 3 and 4 and 25, whatever it happens to be.
Well,
all right.
I wanted to say a couple of things. Dan, I don't know if you had anything that you want to. I just want to say a couple of things. You mentioned wild card, right? You know, that no one was quite sure where Trump was going to be. And he loves every minute of that because that's the negotiating power right there. That's it. So I think that's just an important point to point out. And also just in terms of the Arab nations, I mean, let's be clear. This started in, and we talked about this before, but in the first term with the Abraham. Oh my gosh, it cracks me up. The Abraham Accords. No, I'm going to say Abraham. Sorry. We might as well say Abram, actually. But anyhow, the Abraham Accords, this is where it started. And so David Friedman and others should get a lot of credit as well. And, you know, look, ultimately, where is this going to go? I don't know. But I will say this, that these Arab nations, they're on board with an asterisk, and Trump knows how to work the art of the deal. And I'll just say one last thing on the art of the deal. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, there's a reason they were brought in, because they're business guys and they talk money and they talk deals and they talk Trump's language. More importantly, they talk the language of the Middle East with all of these emirs and all the money and the gold flowing. And you're not going to get it done with Rubio. Okay. You're just not. Now, Rubio was important. Don't get me wrong, but he's a neocon. Right, he is. And you're not going to get it done with traditional diplomats, you know, but you get it done with a couple of business guys. And that was the key to all of this.
The last thing I wanted to bring up doesn't have anything to do with anything we're talking about.
Good, perfect.
But I felt like we needed like a palate cleanser here to finish off the week. Researchers from the University of Western Australia and the University of Warsaw found that when multiple psychological dimensions are considered together, you're factoring in intelligence, personality, emotional intelligence, and decision-making, overall functioning among humans continues developing through midlife, reaching its peak at age 60. In other words, we as humans don't reach our peak until we turn 60 years old. It questions the deeply rooted beliefs that we have that that your peak is your 20s, or maybe it's your 30s when you're most active or when you're most energetic or whatever it happens to be. But it finds that individuals best suited for high-staking decision-making roles are unlikely to be younger than 40 and also older than 65. So, gentlemen, my question to you is, why haven't you peaked yet?
Well, Dan, please, you first.
I mean, I'm questioning that assumption there, John. I feel like I may have peaked a long time ago, and it's just all downhill from here.
Well, let me just say, and you can both say it together, take a wild guess of how old I am. 60.
I don't play that game, David. I've learned not to play that game.
It's like
I'm
telling
not a
a woman,
female.
hey, congrats on being pregnant. You know, like, you never do it.
I am 60 years old, so I love this study.
Here we are.
I literally am hitting my peak. As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, I believe I'm hitting my peak right now in the triple box. And so I'm very excited.
David right now.
Peak David. That's right. That's right. It's like new miniseries on Netflix, season 1, episode 1 right here. That's right. Peak David. Twin Peaks. It's a spinoff from Twin Peaks.
There we go.
Yeah. That was a great question.
I don't have anywhere to go with this. I just wanted to make sure that we all realize that, at least for Dan and I, our best years lie ahead. For David,
yeah, it's downhill. Yeah, no, it's totally. I've reached my peak literally by this afternoon. After I take my nap, I'll be on a downward trend.
Yeah, I think 2:30 this afternoon. That's when we hit, and then.
I think that 65 number, though, I think you just hit that age. Maybe 65 is like, I think that might be the peak age, different definition. That's when you just don't care about anything else and you're just actually enjoying the things around you. And just like, you know what? I do not care.
Can I just say one thing on an age note real quick? This has nothing to do with anything, which is clearly the theme here at the end. But let me just simply say that the other day, my wife and I were talking about our IRAs, and we were like, you know what? Maybe we should take out an IRA or take out some money from the IRA.
You're eligible now, yeah.
Well, thank you. And that's the point. So my wife and I are looking at it going, oh, no, but then we're going to get the penalty. And I went, wait a minute, 59.5. Ding, 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 no penalty.
I got to ask you how that, seriously, I got to ask you how that feels. This is a sign of the times, because I'm 50 now, and I thought about that. I'm like, wow, I've got 9.5 years before that penalty option goes away.
Oh, it feels so amazing. As a matter of fact, it's so therapeutic. Unlike when I turned 50 and the AARP card came in.
Yeah, I got that.
And that was not good. And that's not good.
I'm just jealous you guys have 401ks. That sounds really nice. We'll leave it there for this week, gentlemen. David, Brody, Dan Andros, thank you again for joining me here on Navigating Trump 2.0.
All right, John.